leaving the only home she knew. The autumn wind carried fallen leaves across the courtyard of St. Mary's Convent as Vivian Harper folded her few belongings into a worn leather satchel. 24 years of her life had been spent within these peaceful stone walls, and now the moment of departure had finally arrived. She ran her fingers along the wooden cross hanging around her neck, a parting gift from the nuns who had raised her since she was 5 years old. Sister Catherine appeared in the doorway of the small dormitory, her kind eyes glistening with unshed tears. The elderly nun had been more than a caretaker. She had been the closest thing to a mother that Vivian had ever known. In her weathered hands, she held a sealed envelope containing the letter of recommendation that would hopefully secure Vivian a position at Riverside Academy for Girls in Boston. "Are you prepared for what awaits you beyond these gates?" Sister Catherine asked, her voice trembling slightly. Vivian smoothed down her modest gray dress and tucked a strand of golden brown hair behind her ear. Her hazel eyes reflected both excitement and uncertainty. She had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, yet nothing could truly ready her for the vast unknown world that stretched beyond the convent walls. "I must try, sister. You have taught me well. I have faith that God will guide my path." The two women embraced, and Vivian felt the weight of leaving behind the only security she had ever known. But her heart yearned for purpose, for the chance to make a difference in the lives of young students who needed guidance just as she once had. The train station confusion. Boston's Grand Central Station overwhelmed Vivian's senses the moment she stepped off the regional train. Hundreds of people rushed past her in every direction, their faces buried in newspapers or fixed on destinations she could only imagine. The scent of coal smoke mixed with roasted chestnuts from nearby vendors. Loudspeakers announced departures and arrivals in a constant echo that made her head spin. She clutched her satchel tighter, searching the crowded platform for anyone holding a sign with her name. According to the instructions from Riverside Academy, a representative would meet her at Platform 7 at precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon. "Miss Harper?" A deep, refined voice cut through the chaos. Vivian turned to find a distinguished gentleman in his 60s wearing an impeccable black suit and driver's cap. His silver mustache was perfectly groomed, and his posture spoke of years of professional service. A brass nameplate on his lapel read, "Gerald." "Yes, I am Vivian Harper," she replied, relief washing over her. "Excellent. I apologize for the slight delay. Mr. Thornfield instructed me to collect you immediately. We must hurry as he has a rather tight schedule this evening." Vivian's brow furrowed in confusion. "Mr. Thornfield? I was expecting someone from Riverside Academy." Gerald's expression remained professionally neutral. "Change of plans, miss. The headmistress fell ill quite suddenly, and arrangements were made through Mr. Thornfield's office. He serves on the Academy's board of directors. Please, this way." Too bewildered to argue and not wanting to appear ungrateful, Vivian followed Gerald through the bustling station. They emerged onto a tree-lined street where a sleek black Bentley waited at the curb. The automobile was unlike anything she had ever seen, all polished chrome and glossy paint that reflected the afternoon sunlight. Gerald opened the rear door with practiced grace. The interior was pure luxury, with leather seats the color of burgundy wine and polished wood accents. Vivian slid inside, feeling completely out of place yet unable to deny a small thrill of excitement, the magnificent prison. As Gerald navigated through Boston's busy streets, Vivian pressed her face close to the window, watching the city transform around them. The crowded downtown gradually gave way to elegant brownstones, then to sprawling estates hidden behind iron gates and ancient oak trees. After nearly an hour, they turned onto a private road that seemed to lead away from civilization itself. Vivian's unease grew with each passing mile. This was definitely not the route to any school she could imagine. The forest opened suddenly to reveal Thornfield Manor, and Vivian's breath caught in her throat. The estate was magnificent and intimidating in equal measure. 3 stories of dark gray stone rose before her, with tall windows that seemed to watch her approach. Ivy climbed the walls in artistic patterns, and a fountain featuring marble angels dominated the circular driveway. "Gerald, I believe there has been a terrible mistake," Vivian said, her voice barely audible. "This cannot be where I am meant to go." But the chauffeur had already exited the vehicle and was opening her door. "Mr. Thornfield is expecting you, miss." Straight through the main entrance. Vivian's legs felt unsteady as she climbed the wide stone steps leading to enormous oak doors. Before she could gather the courage to knock, the doors swung open, revealing a stern woman in her 50s wearing a perfectly pressed housekeeper's uniform. "You are late," the woman stated sharply, her gray eyes assessing Vivian from head to toe. "Mr. Thornfield values punctuality above all else. I am Mrs. Helena Crawford, head of household staff." "Please, there has been a misunderstanding," Vivian began, her heart pounding. "I am supposed to be meeting with Riverside Academy about a teaching position. I should not be here." Mrs. Crawford's expression shifted to confusion. "Teaching position? My dear girl, you were hired as a governess for Mr. Thornfield's daughter. The agency assured us you came with excellent references." Before Vivian could protest further, a commanding presence filled the grand entrance hall. The ruthless billionaire. "Mrs. Crawford, has the new governess arrived?" The voice was deep, authoritative, and sent an unexpected shiver down Vivian's spine. She looked up to see a man descending the curved marble staircase, and her breath caught for the second time that afternoon. Sebastian Thornfield moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to absolute control. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, with dark hair styled away from a face of sharp, aristocratic features. His steel-blue eyes were cold and calculating, studying her with an intensity that made Vivian feel exposed. His tailored navy suit fit his tall, powerful frame perfectly, emphasizing broad shoulders and a commanding presence that dominated the entire room. "Mr. Thornfield," Mrs. Crawford interjected quickly, "there appears to be some confusion about." "You look younger than your credentials suggested," Sebastian interrupted, his gaze never leaving Vivian. His voice carried an edge of displeasure. "The agency promised someone with extensive experience." Vivian found her voice, though it trembled slightly. "Sir, I must explain. I am not from any agency. There has been a grave error. I was meant to interview at Riverside Academy, and your driver collected me by mistake." Sebastian's jaw tightened, and something dangerous flashed in those cold eyes. "Gerald." The chauffeur appeared instantly, his face paling as understanding dawned. "Sir, I sincerely apologize." The agency description matched Miss Harper precisely. A young woman with light brown hair, carrying a brown satchel, arriving on the 2 o'clock train from the countryside. "And you did not think to verify her identity?" Sebastian's voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of calm that preceded a storm. Vivian watched the exchange with growing alarm. She had to leave this place immediately. Every instinct screamed that Sebastian Thornfield was not a man to be trifled with, and she wanted no part of whatever complicated situation she had stumbled into. "If you would please arrange transportation to Riverside Academy, I will not trouble you any further," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Sebastian turned his full attention back to her, and for a long moment, he simply stared. Vivian met his gaze despite her fear, something she had learned from Sister Catherine. Honesty and courage were virtues to be practiced, even in the face of intimidation. "It is nearly 6 o'clock in the evening," Sebastian finally said. "Riverside Academy will be closed, and I seriously doubt you have accommodations arranged in the city." "I will manage, sir. This is not your burden to bear." "Mrs. Crawford," Sebastian commanded without breaking eye contact with Vivian, "prepare the Rose guest suite. Miss Harper will remain here tonight. Gerald will transport her to her intended destination first thing tomorrow morning." "Sir, I cannot possibly accept," Vivian protested. "It was not a request, Miss Harper. It was a statement of fact." Sebastian's tone left no room for argument. "This unfortunate situation occurred due to my employee's error. I do not leave problems unresolved. With that declaration, he turned and strode toward a set of double doors that likely led to his private study. The doors closed behind him with a definitive sound that seemed to seal Vivian's fate for the evening. Mrs. Crawford's demeanor softened considerably once Sebastian had departed. Do not let Mr. Thornfield's manner distress you, dear. He has endured considerable hardship recently. Come, let me show you to your room. You must be exhausted from your journey. As Vivian followed the housekeeper up the grand staircase, she could not help but glance back at those closed study doors. Something about Sebastian Thornfield troubled her deeply. It was not merely his cold, commanding demeanor. Behind those steel blue eyes, she had glimpsed something else entirely. She had seen pain dawn in a gilded cage. Morning light streamed through the tall windows of the Rose guest suite, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Vivian stirred awake in the most comfortable bed she had ever experienced, momentarily forgetting where she was. The silk sheets felt like water against her skin, so different from the rough cotton blankets at St. Mary's Convent. Reality crashed back as she sat up, taking in the opulent room that had been her prison for the night. The suite was larger than the entire dormitory she had shared with 6 other girls. Antique furniture in rich mahogany stood against walls papered in delicate rose patterns. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, catching the morning light and scattering rainbow prisms across the Persian rug. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the strange events of the previous day. Dinner had been a quiet, awkward affair. Mrs. Crawford had brought a tray to her room, explaining that Mr. Thornfield was occupied with urgent business matters. Vivian had been relieved not to face those penetrating steel blue eyes again. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Crawford entered carrying a silver tray with tea and toast. Good morning, Miss Harper. I trust you slept well. The housekeeper's manner was much warmer than it had been upon Vivian's arrival. Yes, thank you. The room is beautiful, though far more than I deserve for a single night. Mrs. Crawford set the tray on a small table near the window. Mr. Thornfield wishes to speak with you before Gerald drives you to Boston. He is in the breakfast room. I have taken the liberty of pressing your dress. Vivian's stomach tightened with apprehension. She had hoped to leave without another encounter with the intimidating billionaire. However, refusing his request would be both rude and foolish. After a quick breakfast and careful attention to her appearance, Vivian made her way downstairs. The morning sun made Thornfield Manor look less imposing than it had the previous evening. Through the windows, she could see extensive gardens with late-blooming flowers and perfectly manicured hedges. The proposal that changed everything. The breakfast room was smaller than she expected, though still grand by any reasonable standard. Morning light flooded through French doors that opened onto a stone terrace. Sebastian Thornfield sat at the head of a long mahogany table, a newspaper spread before him and a cup of black coffee at his elbow. He looked up as she entered, and Vivian was struck again by the intensity of his presence. This morning he wore charcoal gray trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing strong forearms. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as though he had been running his fingers through it. He looked tired, she realized. Exhausted, even. Miss Harper. Please, sit. He gestured to the chair nearest him. Vivian settled into the indicated seat, her hands folded primly in her lap. Thank you again for your hospitality, Mr. Thornfield. I apologize for the inconvenience my presence has caused. The inconvenience was entirely my employee's fault, not yours. He set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. I have taken the liberty of contacting Riverside Academy on your behalf. Vivian's heart sank. Have they filled the position? Not exactly. Sebastian's expression was unreadable. It seems there was never a position available. The letter you received was part of a fraudulent scheme. The real headmistress knew nothing about it. The blood drained from Vivian's face. Her entire future, the careful plans she had made, the hope she had carried from the convent, all of it crumbled in an instant. But Sister Catherine received the correspondence. The letter seemed legitimate. These schemes are unfortunately common. People prey on those seeking honest work. Sebastian's voice softened almost imperceptibly. I am sorry to deliver such news. Vivian struggled to maintain her composure. She would not cry in front of this stranger, no matter how devastated she felt. Years at the convent had taught her dignity in the face of hardship. Then I must return to St. Mary's and begin my search anew, she said quietly, though her voice wavered. Or you could accept the position here. Vivian's head snapped up, meeting Sebastian's steady gaze. I beg your pardon. As I mentioned yesterday, I require a governess for my daughter Sophie. She is 8 years old and has proven quite difficult for previous governesses to manage. You possess teaching credentials and come from a background that suggests strong moral character. Mr. Thornfield, I appreciate the offer, but this is highly irregular. We are complete strangers. I have already verified your references with St. Mary's Convent. Sister Catherine spoke very highly of your character, intelligence, and patience. Those are precisely the qualities Sophie needs. Vivian's mind raced. The offer was tempting, terrifyingly so. Yet something about this situation felt dangerous in ways she could not articulate. Sebastian Thornfield emanated a darkness that both frightened and inexplicably drew her. Why would you trust someone you met under such strange circumstances? She asked carefully. For the first time, something flickered in Sebastian's cold eyes. It might have been respect. Because in my experience, people reveal their true nature in unexpected situations. You could have made a scene yesterday, demanded compensation for your trouble, or attempted to exploit the confusion. Instead, you remained courteous and honest. That tells me more than any formal interview ever could. Meeting the broken child. Before Vivian could respond, a commotion erupted from somewhere deeper in the house. A young girl's voice shrieked in anger, followed by the sound of something shattering. Sebastian's jaw tightened, and he stood abruptly. Please excuse me. Perhaps I could help? Vivian offered, rising as well. Some instinct told her this was important. Sebastian studied her for a moment, then nodded curtly. Follow me. They hurried through corridors lined with oil paintings and expensive artwork until they reached a room that must have been a playroom or study. A small figure stood in the center of the chaos. Books had been swept from shelves, toys lay scattered and broken, and a porcelain vase lay in pieces on the hardwood floor. Sophie Thornfield was a tiny storm of fury. She had her father's dark hair, though hers fell in wild curls around a face flushed with rage. Her blue eyes, so like Sebastian's, blazed with defiance and something else. Pain. Mrs. Crawford stood near the doorway, looking helpless and distressed. She refused her breakfast again, sir. When I insisted, she became upset. Sophie. Sebastian's voice was firm but not harsh. This behavior is unacceptable. I hate you, the little girl screamed. I hate everyone. I want my mother. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Sebastian's face went completely blank, a mask of stone that revealed nothing. But Vivian saw his hands clench at his sides, saw the barely perceptible flinch. Without thinking, Vivian moved forward, ignoring Mrs. Crawford's startled gasp. She knelt among the broken pieces, bringing herself to Sophie's eye level. Hello, Sophie. My name is Vivian. That was quite an impressive display of strength. It must have taken considerable effort to create all this chaos. Sophie stared at her, momentarily stunned by this unexpected response. Who are you? I am someone who understands feeling angry and scared and alone, even when surrounded by people who care about you. You do not understand anything. Sophie's voice cracked. Nobody understands. Vivian reached out slowly, giving the child time to pull away if she wished. When Sophie did not move, Vivian gently took her small hand. You are right. I cannot fully understand your pain because it belongs only to you. But I can sit with you while you feel it. Sometimes that is all we need. Someone willing to stay. Tears began streaming down Sophie's face, her anger dissolving into pure grief. The little girl collapsed into Vivian's arms, sobbing against her shoulder with the kind of desperate intensity that spoke of long-suppressed sorrow. Vivian held her, rocking slightly and murmuring soft reassurances. She did not try to stop the tears or offer empty platitudes. She simply stayed, present and steady, while Sophie released the storm inside her. The walls began to crack. When Sophie finally quieted, exhausted from crying, Vivian looked up to find Sebastian still standing in the doorway. The mask had slipped. Raw emotion flickered across his face, a mixture of anguish, helplessness, and something that looked almost like hope. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Vivian understood. This was not about hiring a governess. This was about a desperate father who had run out of options, who watched his daughter drowning in grief and could not reach her. I think Sophie and I should have some tea and perhaps read a story together, Vivian said softly. Would that be acceptable, Mr. Thornfield? Sebastian nodded, seemingly unable to speak. He turned and left quickly, but not before Vivian saw him wipe at his eyes. Mrs. Crawford approached cautiously. Miss Harper, I have never seen her calm so quickly. The last 3 governesses resigned within days. Grief is not something to be managed or controlled, Vivian replied, helping Sophie to a chair. It is something to be witnessed and honored. Over the next hour, Vivian cleaned up the mess with Sophie's help, turning it into a game rather than a punishment. They sorted books by color, invented stories about the broken toys, and carefully swept up the shattered vase while Vivian shared tales from the convent. Sophie remained mostly quiet, but she stayed close to Vivian, occasionally touching her sleeve as if to confirm she was real. When Sebastian returned, he found them sitting together on the floor, Sophie's head resting against Vivian's shoulder as Vivian read from a book of fairy tales. Miss Harper, might I speak with you privately? His voice was carefully neutral, but Vivian detected the underlying tension. Of course. She squeezed Sophie's hand. I will return shortly. Perhaps you could choose which story we read next. In the hallway, Sebastian leaned against the wall, suddenly looking every bit as exhausted as Vivian had suspected. Up close, she could see shadows under his eyes, lines of stress around his mouth. My wife died 6 months ago, he said abruptly. Cancer. It was swift and merciless. Sophie watched her mother fade away despite every treatment, every prayer, every desperate hope we clung to. Vivian's heart ached for them both. I am so very sorry. Sophie was inconsolable at first, then she became angry. The anger has not stopped. Governesses, therapists, specialists, no one has been able to reach her. He met Vivian's eyes, and she saw the vulnerability there. Until you. Mr. Thornfield. Sebastian. Please. Sebastian, she continued gently, I have no special gift. I simply recognized her pain because I have known loss too. My mother abandoned me at the convent when I was 5. I never knew my father. That kind of wound never fully heals. We just learn to live with it. Then teach her that. Teach her how to live with it. His voice was raw with desperation. Name your price. Whatever you want, it is yours. Just please, help my daughter. The decision that sealed her fate. Vivian should have said no. Every rational thought screamed that this situation was too complicated, too emotionally fraught. Sebastian Thornfield was not offering her a job. He was offering her a role in his family's tragedy. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the same thing she had seen in Sophie's. 2 people drowning in grief, unable to reach each other despite being so close. I do not want money, she heard herself say. If I stay, it will be because Sophie needs someone who sees her pain rather than trying to fix it. And because you need to learn how to reach your daughter again." Sebastian straightened, hope and fear warring on his face. "Does that mean you accept?" Vivian thought of Sister Catherine, who had taught her that sometimes God's plan revealed itself in unexpected ways. She thought of the teaching position that had been a lie, and the twist of fate that brought her to this magnificent, sorrowful house. "I will stay for 3 months, she said carefully. "If at the end of that time Sophie has improved and you feel my services are beneficial, we can discuss a more permanent arrangement." 3 months, Sebastian repeated, then extended his hand. "You have my word that you will be treated with respect and given everything you need to succeed." Vivian took his hand, and the moment their palms touched, something electric passed between them. It was not romantic, exactly. It was recognition. Two damaged souls acknowledging each other's scars. She pulled her hand away quickly, unsettled by the sensation. "I should return to Sophie. She will wonder where I have gone." "Vivian." Sebastian's use of her first name stopped her. "Thank you. You have given me something I thought was lost forever." "What is that?" "Hope." As Vivian walked back to Sophie, she could not shake the feeling that her life had just changed in ways she could not begin to comprehend. She had come to Boston seeking a simple teaching position. Instead, she had found herself drawn into the orbit of two broken hearts. And the most dangerous part was that she wanted to stay. Not because of duty or obligation, but because something deep inside her recognized that she belonged here, in this house of sorrow and secrets. She found Sophie exactly where she had left her, clutching the book of fairy tales. The little girl looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "Are you leaving?" Sophie's voice was small and frightened. Vivian knelt beside her and smiled gently. "No, sweetheart. I am staying. For quite a while, actually." "Now, which story shall we read?" Sophie threw her arms around Vivian's neck, holding tight. "The one about the princess who was lost but found her way home." "That sounds perfect," Vivian whispered, holding the child close. Through the window, she could see Sebastian standing in the garden, his hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his grief, the burden of his loneliness. Vivian had entered Thornfield Manor by mistake. But as she sat with Sophie and began to read about lost princesses and impossible journeys, she realized that perhaps there were no mistakes. Perhaps this was exactly where she was meant to be. What she did not realize was that in agreeing to heal a broken family, she had set in motion something far more dangerous than she could imagine. Sebastian Thornfield was not a man who did things by halves. When he wanted something, he claimed it completely. And he had just decided he wanted her to stay forever. The transformation of Thornfield Manor. 3 weeks had passed since Vivian Harper had agreed to stay at Thornfield Manor, and the house itself seemed to have awakened from a long, dark sleep. Sophie's laughter now echoed through corridors that had known only silence and sorrow. The little girl still had difficult days, moments when grief overwhelmed her, but she no longer destroyed rooms or screamed her pain at the world. Vivian had established routines that gave Sophie structure without feeling restrictive. Mornings were for lessons in mathematics and literature. Afternoons were spent in the gardens, where they collected leaves and studied nature. Evenings belonged to stories and quiet conversations about feelings that Sophie was learning to name rather than simply endure. But it was not just Sophie who was changing. Sebastian Thornfield had become a different man, though the transformation was subtle enough that only someone watching closely would notice. He smiled more often, especially when he heard his daughter's laughter. The hard lines around his mouth had softened. The darkness in his eyes had lifted, replaced by something warmer and infinitely more dangerous. That he had also begun spending more time at home, often appearing in doorways to watch Vivian work with Sophie. Sometimes he would join their afternoon walks through the gardens, listening as Vivian explained the life cycles of plants or the patterns of migrating birds. His presence made Vivian's heart race in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. Dangerous proximity. On a crisp October afternoon, Vivian sat in the library with Sophie, helping her practice reading. The little girl had fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from their earlier adventure exploring the estate's woods. Vivian should have moved, should have called Mrs. Crawford to help settle Sophie in her room, but she remained still, unwilling to disturb the child's peaceful rest. The library was her favorite room in the entire manor. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held thousands of books, and the scent of old paper and leather bindings reminded her of the convent's modest collection. Afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, casting everything in golden light. She did not hear Sebastian enter until he spoke. She has not slept that peacefully since her mother died. Vivian looked up to find him standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, watching them with an expression that made her breath catch. It was tender and possessive all at once, as though he were committing this moment to memory. She wore herself out chasing squirrels, Vivian whispered, smiling at the memory. She has so much energy now. It is wonderful to see. Sebastian moved closer, settling into the chair across from them. He had removed his suit jacket and tie, leaving him in just his white shirt with the top buttons undone. Vivian tried not to notice how the casual attire made him seem more approachable, more real. "You have given her something I could not," he said quietly. "You have given her permission to grieve while still finding joy. I did not know that was possible. You were drowning in your own grief. It is difficult to help someone else when you are struggling to breed yourself." Sebastian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. "And what about you, Vivian? Who helps you when you are drowning?" The question caught her off guard. In her 3 weeks at Thornfield Manor, their conversations had focused entirely on Sophie. This sudden shift to personal territory felt intimate and slightly dangerous. "I learned long ago to keep my head above water on my own," she replied carefully. "That is not the same as being happy. It is merely survival. Sometimes survival is enough. It should not be." Sebastian's voice dropped lower, more intense. "You deserve more than just surviving. You deserve to live fully, to be cherished, to have someone fight for your happiness the way you fight for Sophie's." Vivian's pulse quickened. The air between them felt charged with unspoken emotions. She knew she should deflect, should return the conversation to safer ground, but something in his eyes held her captive. "Mr. Thornfield." "Sebastian. How many times must I ask you to call me Sebastian?" "Sebastian," she corrected softly, "I am your employee. Such conversations are inappropriate." "To hell with appropriate." He stood abruptly, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Do you think I planned this? Do you think I wanted to feel this way?" Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. "Feel what way?" He turned to face her fully, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole her breath. "Like I am drowning again, but this time I do not want to be saved. Like every moment you are not in the room feels incomplete. Like watching you with my daughter makes me believe in second chances." "Please do not say such things," Vivian whispered, though part of her desperately wanted him to continue. "Why? Because it frightens you? Because it is inconvenient? Or because you feel it too?" The truth she could not deny. Sophie stirred in her sleep, and the moment shattered. Sebastian stepped back, composing himself with visible effort. When Mrs. Crawford appeared at the door to collect Sophie for her afternoon rest, the housekeeper's knowing glance between them suggested she had sensed the tension. After Sophie was carried away, Vivian remained in the library, her hands trembling slightly. She should leave this house immediately. What Sebastian had suggested was impossible, scandalous even. She was a woman raised in a convent, with no family and no prospects beyond her own skills. He was one of the wealthiest men in Boston, a widower still mourning his wife. Yet she could not deny what burned inside her. Every time Sebastian smiled at her, every accidental brush of their hands, every shared glance across the dinner table set her heart racing. She had read about such feelings in novels, had heard the older sisters at the convent whisper about love and desire, but she had never expected to experience it herself. "You are still here." Sebastian stood in the doorway again, this time with 2 glasses of wine. He offered one to her, and when she hesitated, he smiled slightly. "It is just wine, Vivian. Not a commitment." She accepted the glass, her fingers brushing his. Even that small contact sent electricity through her veins. Sebastian settled into the chair across from her once more, but this time the distance felt deliberate, as though he was giving her space to think. "I apologize for my outburst," he said quietly. "It was unfair of me to place such burdens on you." Was it true? The question escaped before Vivian could stop it. Every word. Sebastian met her eyes steadily. "I have tried to ignore these feelings, tried to convince myself it was merely gratitude for what you have done for Sophie. But I cannot lie to myself any longer. You have become essential to both of us." Vivian took a small sip of wine, needing the courage it might provide. "Your wife has been gone only 6 months. Your grief is still fresh. Perhaps what you feel is simply loneliness seeking comfort. Do not diminish what I feel by reducing it to loneliness." His voice was firm but not angry. "I loved Catherine with everything I had. Her death destroyed me. But you have shown me that it is possible to love again without betraying what came before. The crisis that changed everything." Before Vivian could respond, a scream pierced the air. Sophie's scream. Both of them were on their feet instantly, racing toward the sound. They found Sophie in her room, standing in the middle of the floor, her face pale and her breathing rapid. "She will not wake up," Sophie sobbed, pointing at her bed. "Mama will not wake up." Vivian's heart broke as she realized what was happening. Sophie was having a waking nightmare, reliving the trauma of finding her mother unconscious in the final days of her illness. "Sophie, sweetheart, look at me." Vivian knelt in front of the child, taking her face gently in her hands. "You are safe. You are here with me and your father. Your mama is not in pain anymore. She is at peace." But Sophie was too deep in her panic. Her breathing became more labored, and her small body began to shake. Sebastian moved forward, but Vivian held up a hand, stopping him. "Sophie, listen to my voice. We are going to breathe together. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Can you do that with me?" Slowly, patiently, Vivian guided Sophie through breathing exercises until the panic began to subside. Then she pulled the little girl into her arms, holding her close while she cried. Sebastian watched with an expression of complete helplessness. When Sophie finally calmed enough to speak, she reached out one small hand to her father. "Papa, I am sorry. I am sorry I have been so angry." Sebastian dropped to his knees beside them, gathering both Sophie and Vivian into his arms. "You have nothing to apologize for, my darling girl. Nothing at all." They stayed that way for a long time, the 3 of them holding each other in the fading afternoon light. And in that moment, Vivian felt something shift irrevocably. They were no longer employer and employee, father and governess. They had become something else entirely. A family, broken and healing, but undeniably bound together. Confessions under the stars. That evening, after Sophie was finally settled in bed with Vivian reading to her until she slept, Sebastian waited for Vivian in the garden. The night was cool and clear, with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "She is sleeping peacefully now," Vivian said softly as she approached him. "I will check on her again before I retire." "You have done more than check on her. You have saved her." Sebastian turned to face her, and in the moonlight, his face looked younger, more vulnerable. "You have saved us both. I have only done what anyone with compassion would do." "No." Sebastian moved closer, and this time Vivian did not step back. "What you have done is extraordinary. You walked into our broken lives and showed us how to live again. You asked for nothing in return, expected nothing, yet gave us everything. Sebastian, I cared deeply for Sophie. And I, she hesitated, afraid to speak the truth aloud. And you what, Vivian? Please, tell me. I need to hear you say it. Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. And I have come to care for you as well. More than I should. More than is proper or wise. Sebastian closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to cup her face with infinite gentleness. There is nothing improper about two people finding each other in the darkness. There is nothing unwise about choosing to live again after losing everything. Your wife would want me to be happy. Would want Sophie to have a mother who loves her. Catherine was many things, but she was not cruel. She would understand. Tears spilled down Vivian's cheeks. I am nobody. I have nothing to offer you but myself. You are everything, Sebastian said fiercely. You are sunshine after endless rain. You are hope when I had none. You are the woman I never expected to find but cannot imagine living without. This is madness, Vivian whispered, even as she leaned into his touch. Then let us be mad together. Sebastian's thumb brushed away her tears. Stay with us. Not as an employee, but as my partner. As Sophie's mother. As my wife. Vivian's breath caught. You cannot mean that. We have known each other less than a month. I knew I loved Catherine the moment I met her. Sometimes the heart recognizes its home immediately. His eyes searched hers desperately. Tell me you do not feel it too. Tell me this connection between us is only in my imagination, and I will never speak of it again. But Vivian could not tell him that, because it would be a lie. From the moment she had stepped into Thornfield Manor, she had felt drawn to this broken family. From the moment Sebastian's eyes had met hers, something had shifted in her soul. Surrender to love. I feel it, she admitted finally. God help me, I feel it too. But I am terrified. I have never loved anyone this way. I do not know how to be what you need. Just be yourself. That is all I have ever needed. Sebastian's voice was rough with emotion. Say yes, Vivian. Say you will marry me. Say you will be Sophie's mother and my wife. Say you will let us love you the way you deserve to be loved. Vivian thought of all the reasons she should refuse. The scandal it would cause, the questions people would ask, the whispers that would follow them. But when she looked into Sebastian's eyes, none of that mattered. What mattered was Sophie sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. What mattered was the way Sebastian's darkness had lifted. What mattered was the love growing in her own heart, wild and fierce and undeniable. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. Sebastian pulled her into his arms, and when his lips met hers, Vivian understood what all those novels had been trying to describe. This was not just a kiss. It was a promise, a claiming, a declaration that they belonged to each other now and forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this choice. I could never regret choosing love, Vivian replied. Even if the whole world condemns us, I could never regret choosing you. They stood together under the stars, two damaged souls who had found healing in each other. The future stretched before them, uncertain and challenging, but filled with hope. Sophie would have a mother. Sebastian would have a partner. And Vivian, the convent girl who had arrived at Thornfield Manor by mistake, had found her true home at last. As they walked back toward the house hand in hand, Mrs. Crawford watched from an upstairs window, smiling to herself. She had known from the first day that Vivian Harper was exactly what this family needed. Sometimes fate worked in mysterious ways, bringing together people who were meant to heal each other. Inside, Sophie slept peacefully, dreaming of gardens and stories and a future where happiness was possible again. Tomorrow, she would wake to find Vivian still there, still keeping her promises, still showing her that love could survive even the darkest losses. And Sebastian, as he held Vivian close that night in the garden, finally allowed himself to believe in second chances. He had thought his life was over when Catherine died. Instead, it had simply been waiting for the right woman to walk through his doors and remind him what it meant to truly live. A new beginning. The following morning, Sebastian called his lawyer and began making arrangements. There would be a small, private ceremony in the estate's chapel. Sister Catherine would be invited, of course, to give her blessing to the woman she had raised. Sophie would be the flower girl, wearing a dress the color of spring flowers. When Vivian told Sophie the news over breakfast, the little girl launched herself into her arms with a squeal of pure joy. "You are going to be my real mama?" Sophie asked, her eyes shining. "If you will have me," Vivian replied, her heart overflowing. "I love you," Sophie whispered fiercely. "I love you so much. And I love you, my darling girl. Always and forever." Sebastian watched them embrace, his own eyes damp with unshed tears. He had dragged Vivian to Thornfield Manor through a case of mistaken identity. He had kept her there through a combination of desperation and hope. But she had stayed because of love, pure and simple. The fire that had been consuming him since Catherine's death had finally been extinguished. Not by forgetting, but by allowing himself to love again. Vivian had not replaced his first wife. She had shown him that the heart was capable of holding multiple loves, that honoring the past did not mean refusing the future. As the three of them sat together in the morning sunlight, making plans for their new life together, Thornfield Manor felt different. The shadows had lifted. The silence had been replaced with laughter. The grief remained, as it always would, but it no longer ruled them. Vivian Harper had come to Boston seeking a teaching position. Instead, she had found a family, a home, and a love that would sustain her through whatever challenges lay ahead. She had saved Sophie and Sebastian, but in truth, they had saved her too. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a simple mistake. Sometimes the best love stories start in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes, when you think your life is over, it is actually just beginning.